All right. So you sent us some research about creatine,
Uh-huh.
and it seems like you're really interested in like the safety and effectiveness for teens.
Yeah, that's right. It's a pretty big topic these days.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to be looking at a 2021 review paper
Okay.
from Nutrients. It's by Jigim and Kirksick.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that one.
They really get into like the science of creatine for those under 18.
Yeah, it's super comprehensive. They look at the effects on athletic performance, but
Right.
also like how it could be used to treat some medical conditions.
Okay, so before we get too far, can you just give us like a quick rundown of what creatine is and how it works?
Sure. So creatine is something that's found naturally in our muscles.
Oh, okay.
And it's kind of like an energy reserve,
Mm.
especially for, those short bursts of intense activity.
So like when you're sprinting or weightlifting.
Exactly.
So it's not like a synthetic thing.
Nope, not at all. Our bodies actually make it.
Hmm.
And we also get it from some foods, like
Hmm.
red meat and seafood.
Okay, but I guess the amount we get from food isn't always enough.
Yeah, you're right. Especially for serious athletes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's where creatine supplements come in. They can boost those creatine stores.
Gotcha. So this review mentions that creatine use is becoming more and more common in adolescents.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these stats are pretty surprising.
Yeah, for sure. One that stood out to me was that in 2019, more than 25% of teen athletes
Wow.
who were competing internationally said they used creatine.
That's a lot more than I would have thought.
Yeah, it seems like creatine isn't some niche supplement anymore. It's becoming pretty mainstream.
So does that mean it's actually beneficial for these young athletes?
Well, the research is still kind of limited for teens,
Right.
but there have been some studies on swimmers and soccer players.
Okay.
For example, one study found that creatine actually helped improve sprint swimming performance.
So there's evidence that it can actually make a difference.
Yeah, and it's not just swimming either.
Oh, okay.
Another study showed that it improved soccer dribbling skills.
Int-
And then another one found that it increased power output during exercise tests.
Okay, so that's a pretty good range of athletic benefits.
It is.
But I'm sure one of the first things parents think about is safety.
Of course. Yeah, and that's a really important question. The research that focuses on healthy adolescents is still in the early stages,
I think
but none of the studies so far have reported any negative side effects.
that's good to hear. Is there anything official that addresses the safety concerns?
Well, the FDA recently designated creatine as generally recognized as safe, or GRS,
Okay.
and that includes older children and teenagers.
So that's a pretty strong indicator that it's safe when it's used the right way.
Right.
Now, I know there's always more to the story. What else does the research tell us?
Well, it turns out that creatine might actually be useful for treating certain conditions in young people.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, one area where it can be really helpful is for kids with creatine deficiency syndromes.
Creatine deficiency syndrome.
Yeah, these are genetic conditions that affect how the body makes or uses creatine.
So in these cases, it's not about like enhancing performance. It's about addressing an actual health issue.
Exactly. The review mentions a case study of a young girl with a type of creatine deficiency. She was
Wow.
having developmental delays,
Oh, wow.
but once she started taking creatine supplements, her cognitive development actually improved quite a bit.
That's amazing.
And it's not just those types of syndromes either. Researchers are also looking into creatine for kids with things like muscular dystrophy.
So it might be able to counteract muscle weakness.
Exactly. And improve their strength and quality of life.
Are there any other areas where they're looking into creatine?
Oh, yeah. Researchers are investigating it for treating traumatic brain injuries in children.
Wow.
And some are even exploring its use as a supplement during pregnancy.
It seems like we keep finding new possibilities with creatine.
We really do.
But I'm sure a lot of our listeners are wondering about the long-term effects, especially for young people whose bodies are still developing.
Right. We'll talk about that more in the next part of our deep dive. But for now, I can say that the current research on adults suggests there aren't any harmful effects from long-term use in healthy people.
Okay, so that's at least a little reassuring.
Definitely.
But I'm sure parents would still want to be careful.
Absolutely.
What advice would you give to parents if their kid is interested in taking creatine?
I think the most important thing is to make an informed decision. The International Society of Sports Nutrition has some recommendations.
Okay.
They suggest that creatine should only be used for young athletes who are already involved in serious training programs.
So it's not something to be taken lightly.
Right. And of course, they need to have a good understanding of nutrition.
So it's a decision that should be made carefully with input from coaches and healthcare providers.
Definitely.
Well, this has been a really great start.
Yeah.
We've gone over the basics of creatine, talked about its potential benefits,
Mhm.
and touched on the issue of safety.
It's a lot to consider.
There's still so much more to explore, right?
Oh, yeah. In part 2, we'll dive into some of the common myths about creatine.
Huh. And we'll look more closely at the long-term health effects.
This is good.
And we'll also discuss some important practical considerations for parents and young athletes.
Awesome. Stay tuned for part 2.
See you then.
Welcome back. So we've already covered a lot about creatine, like how it works,
Yeah.
the benefits, the safety stuff.
Right, but I know there's a lot of, confusing information out there about creatine.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There are still a lot of myths and misconceptions.
Like that whole thing about creatine being a steroid.
Oh, yeah. That's a classic one. And it's totally false. Like we talked about, creatine is a natural compound.
Right, our bodies make it.
Hmm.
What are some other misconceptions you hear?
Let's see. Well, another common one is that it's only for bodybuilders or powerlifters.
Yeah, I can see how people might think that. But we know that it can do more than just build muscle.
Exactly. Like we mentioned, there's research about potential cognitive benefits.
Right, and that could be really important for young people.
Yeah, imagine if it could help them focus better or improve their memory or even their grades in school.
That would be incredible. But I think for a lot of parents, the biggest concern is still the long-term health effects.
I understand that, especially when we're talking about teenagers.
They want to know that it's not going to hurt their kids down the road.
Of course. And it's worth noting that most of the long-term studies have been done on adults.
Oh, so not specifically on teenagers.
Right. But the good news is that based on the evidence we have, it seems like creatine is pretty safe in the long term.
Okay.
The International Society of Sports Nutrition has said that there's no real evidence to suggest that long-term creatine use, even for up to 5 years, causes any harm to healthy people.
That's good to hear.
It is. Especially since creatine has been studied and used for a while now.
Yeah, but there's probably always going to be some caution when it comes to supplements.
Definitely.
Especially for young people.
I think it's really important for everyone to talk openly about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Young athletes, parents, coaches, healthcare providers, everyone needs to be on the same page.
This kind of leads into the ethical side of things too, right? Oh yeah, for sure. There are a lot of ethical considerations when we're talking about creatine use in adolescents.
Like some people say that it gives young athletes an unfair advantage.
That's a good point. Especially if it becomes really common in youth sports.
Right. What about the kids who can't afford it or choose not to use it?
Exactly. It raises some questions about fairness and equal access.
And I imagine some young athletes might feel pressure to use creatine.
Absolutely. Even if they don't really want to.
From their coaches or parents or even their teammates.
Right. We need to make sure that young athletes have the freedom to make their own choices about their bodies and their health.
Without feeling pressured.
Yeah, it's about respecting their individual decisions and values.
And making sure their well-being comes first.
Definitely. We need to protect them from any kind of pressure or exploitation.
I think it's also important to remember that winning isn't everything.
Yeah, success in sports shouldn't come at the expense of a young person's health or their ethics.
We need to encourage a culture of integrity in youth sports.
Absolutely. It should be about developing skills, working together, and loving the sport.
Not just about winning no matter what.
Exactly. So this brings us to the question of age limits.
Ah, yeah. Should there be an age limit for using creatine?
That's a tough one. There's no easy answer.
Right. Some people think there should be a strict rule like with alcohol or tobacco.
While others think it should be up to the individual with guidance from their parents and doctor.
It seems like there are strong arguments on both sides.
There really are. It depends on a lot of factors.
Like how mature the young person is.
Right. And whether they understand the risks and benefits.
And whether they're going to use it responsibly.
Exactly.
It seems like this ethical debate is something we need to keep talking about.
It is. And we need to consider everyone's point of view.
The important thing is to make decisions that put the well-being of young athletes first.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, we've covered a lot in this part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
We talk about some of the myths about creatine.
Mm-hmm.
We went deeper into the long-term health effects.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about some of the ethical issues.
It's all connected.
It's a good reminder that ethics are just as important as the science.
Absolutely. And it's a conversation that needs to continue, especially as creatine becomes more and more popular among young people.
So what's next? What else should our listeners know about creatine and its role in youth sports?
Well, in the last part of our deep dive, we're going to look at the future of creatine research.
Oh?
And we'll explore some bigger questions about the role of supplements in youth athletics.
That sounds really interesting.
It is, so stick around for part 3.
We'll see you there. Okay, so we've talked about the science, the myths, the ethics, the
Yeah,
safety.
we've really covered a lot.
But what about the future of creatine research? Where do we go from here?
Well, one area that I think is really interesting is personalized creatine supplementation.
Personalized.
Okay.
So like tailoring it to each individual.
Exactly, because we know that everyone responds to creatine a little differently. Like your age, your sex, how active you are, even your genes can all play a role.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So instead of just having a standard recommendation,
Right.
we could figure out how to give people the right amount of creatine for their specific needs.
That's the idea. And the cool thing is that with all the advancements in genetic testing and personalized nutrition, it's becoming more and more possible.
It's like precision medicine, but for sports nutrition.
Exactly. And this could be really helpful for young athletes, especially because their bodies are still developing.
Yeah, it could help make sure they're getting the right amount at the right time.
Right.
Now, we've talked a lot about the effects of creatine on muscles and athletic performance. Are there any other areas of research that you're excited about?
Yeah, definitely. Researchers are looking into how creatine might affect other things like bone health,
Wow.
immune function, and even healthy aging.
So it's kind of a multifaceted compound.
Yeah, it really is. And the more we learn about it, the more we realize its potential.
Now, I know that creatine isn't the only supplement out there.
Oh, definitely not.
Young athletes might be using or thinking about all sorts of different products.
That's true. And it brings up a bigger question. What role should supplements play in youth sports in general?
Yeah, that's a really complex issue.
It is. There are ethical and practical considerations to think about.
On the one hand, supplements can provide some nutrients that might be missing from an athlete's diet,
Right.
and they can help support specific training needs.
But on the other hand, there's the risk of taking too much or having side effects.
Yeah, and there's also the pressure that young athletes might feel to use these products.
Absolutely. So it's a balancing act.
I think the most important thing is to take a holistic approach to youth athletic development.
I agree. We need to focus on things like a healthy diet, proper training,
Right.
enough sleep managing stress, overall well-being.
Those are the foundations.
Exactly. And if supplements are used, they should be seen as tools that support those fundamentals, not replacements for them.
And it's so important for young athletes, their parents, and their coaches to really understand the potential benefits and risks of supplements.
For sure. Talking to healthcare professionals is always a good idea, too.
It's about making smart choices that support health and performance in a safe and responsible way.
Exactly.
Well, this deep dive has been really eye-opening.
It has.
We've learned so much about the science, the ethics, the future of creatine research.
What are some of the key takeaways that you hope our listener will remember?
I think the biggest one is that creatine has a lot of potential,
It does.
but we need to be thoughtful and informed about how we use it in young people.
Absolutely.
And we always need to remember that science and nutrition are constantly changing.
Right. So stay curious, keep learning, and make choices that support your health and performance responsibly.
That's great advice. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure. It's been great talking with you.
And to our listener, thanks for listening. We hope you found this helpful. Until next time.